And it just started broadening my mind because, as you said, we were so young when we went in. It's a lot that happens between your late teens to your mid-20s that dictate a lot in your life. And it's a lot of life lessons that you have to learn. It's just that we learned them in prison.
This upload is my first interview. It's the first of many in a series I have up and coming. I had to do this one on Zoom, so the video quality is not the greatest, but I still think you'll enjoy it because my guest, Marcus Blue, always has great insight. He and I met about 20 years ago while serving time in prison and also attending a college program, and we've been in touch ever since. I think you'll enjoy what he has to say. Let me know in the comments, message me. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Help me, help others. Thanks. One of the things I want to do with the interviews is just talk about success stories. I've mentioned that to you in the past. So there's academic success, there's financial success, there's community, there's all kinds of success. But at a minimum, what that means is you're not back in prison. Right. But you're doing more than just not going back. You're actually, doing your own business and being pretty successful. So that's the real highlight, is just to focus on people who have been successful.
Gotcha.
I was thinking the other day, have we even met each other's kids? I think it's been that long since I've seen you, since my daughter's baby shower.
Yeah.
And she just turned 14 last week. It's been that long. She just turned 14 last week.
My daughter is 14. I can't remember that was the same time frame.
Yep.
Because even now, I was thinking I was having a hard time because I couldn't do it at the house. And I'm like, well, I am going to Houston. Jabril wanted to go. I said, man, we could set it up and just go down now. And I'm like, man, it's been a while since I've seen that, brother.
Yeah, in fact, Jabril was over here by my house the other day. He posted some pictures.
About the boy.
Yeah. That was right down the street.
Right. Small world, but sometimes it takes for that type of stuff to happen to remind us, know what I'm saying? A lot of times we think we don't have the time. We got to make time.
Yeah. So you and I met each other, man, like 20 years ago at this point. It's weird to say that. 20 years ago. In 2001 or 2 or 3 or something like that.
Somewhere around there.
While both of us were serving time in prison. So if you could say a little bit about just your background, because as it turns out, I used to live over there where you're at for a little while. Some of my family's from Hearn. But if you could just say a little bit about growing up in the different places that you've been.
I got you. Well, I was raised in Houston, at least as far back as I can remember. We lived in 2 neighborhoods before I lived in Bryan. We used to live in Studewood, which was predominantly, a black neighborhood. I was fortunate compared to a lot of my friends. I had both my parents, in my house. I had one older brother. And I can't think of anything, abnormal or super great or super wrong with my upbringing, just normal kid stuff. We moved to Inwood during my middle school years, and that was a little different from me because it was a mixed neighborhood, both race-wise and money-wise. Studewood was one way with both of those. It was cool. Met a lot of friends, ended up going to high school there. Still have friends to this day from that area. Then my parents separated my junior year in high school, and that's when I moved to Bryan, which was refreshing to have family. I didn't have a family in Houston beside my immediate family in my house. So to have cousins, uncles and aunties' houses I could visit, I really loved that. And then getting my car, my uncles and my cousins, having an auto body shop, being around customizing cars, and that's where that thing began with me. But it wasn't about 2 years after that I ended up getting in trouble.
That was during your teenage years?
Yeah, my teenage year, like my senior year in high school.
Yeah, I didn't really start getting in trouble with the law, like running away from the house and getting picked up by the police till I was 15, 16 years old. So I just wasn't very good at it. I didn't last very long at it because I went to prison pretty quick. So you ended up in prison. How old were you when you went?
18.
18 years old. I was 18 years old also. What was that like? going in as a teenager in the, was this like late 90s, 98, 90,
Mid
early
mid 90s, 95.
90s?
It was life changing because I spoke about the move to Bryan. Like I say, having both my parents, they made good money. And when I moved with my mom to my grandma's house, that was my first time being thrust into poverty. You know, I remember the first weekend coming by and me asking my mom for money. And I think she gave me $20. And then the next week came and I'm used to, hey, mom, can I have $20 so I can go to the mall, play arcades or whatever the case? And she was like, ain't no money. And in the past, all I had to do was just keep asking. And, you know, it started to dawn on me that this is a different situation.
Yeah.
You know, my house, 4 bedrooms, like 5, 6 adults and kids and whatnot. About a year before the actual major trouble happened, you know, I started dabbling, you know, with going to the club, other stuff, hanging around older people, whatnot, who was getting into things. You know, me growing up in Houston, seeing people doing similar crimes, you know, I took it for play. I really didn't understand the consequences. I'm like, well, the first time I get caught, you know, I'm gonna for sure get probation and then I can step back. You know, I had this plan in my mind because I thought I was so smart. I saw how fast stuff moved in Houston, even being a schoolboy. So when things started going awry, I thought I was going to be able to outthink the situation. Being in Bryan, a smaller town, you know, oftentimes you always think you're going to be that one in a million when it comes to the good side of things, but you don't never think about when your car gets pulled for the bad side of things with that one in a million feeling. So it kind of, you know, it progressed from me, you know, selling weed, stealing rims, which eventually, you know, talking with my friends led to, you know, carjacking. It just was faster. Yeah, we had this plan where we didn't intend on hurting anybody or whatever. But as I look back on it now, it's really foolish to put yourself in a violent situation and not think that violence can come from that. But I didn't really understand that as a youth.
And it's interesting that you actually were conscious of all of those variables. I mean, that's how I think we would explain it now.
All right.
Most of the time when we think of crime, I think people who are unfamiliar with it believe that people who are committing crimes are doing it in a rational way. And I just don't think that the majority of crimes that are committed are done in a rational, calculated way. There might be people who are drunk or high or in the heat of the moment or impulsive or something like that. But in my situation, yours, and even Elliot, when he's told his story before, they're all very similar. We were all pretty conscious of a lot of the decisions we were making, and that they were wrong, but we thought that we could outsmart the system or get away with it. I don't know that many people spend a lot of time thinking through those things as a teenager. Maybe that's why we all ended up in the same place that we did. We all were very, very similar in that regard. Because I remember also being pretty consciously aware of the choices I wanted to make, where I wanted to go. And the way Elliot says it, I think he said he thought he could do a 9 to 5 doing crime. Like that's how he thought of himself every day. He was going to live his life committing crimes as if it were his 9 to 5 and that he could get away with that somehow. But that was the 90s. Like, maybe because we're older, as I look out at society today or like the media or the music, things are not as, I don't know, focused as much on things like gang banging. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be as popular and as cool and as a part of the cultural structure as it was back in the 90s when we were growing up.
Right.
I don't know, it's just different.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if it's just the internet being exposed to so much more, because that does exist, but not at the intensity as it once did.
When you went to prison, you ended up on Clemens unit. Is that right?
That was the first unit. Once I went through processing, I technically went to, not pre-release, I forgot what you call it, where you kind of go there your first 2 years.
Like a transit facility.
Yeah, I went to a transit facility. But then once I did that 2 years, I went through processing again. I ended up being assigned to Clemens, which is a youngster unit, population of 17 to 25-year-olds. Plus, it also has the Wild P program, which is 14 to 21-year-olds. There are 2 units, at least at the time back then, that did that. I remember when I got there, I was like, what's up with them little dudes with the one-piece jumpers? Because, we had a shirt and pants. They was like, you ever see on TV and a person get tried as an adult? I was like, yeah. He said, that's all them people. Man, even being in prison, that was still shocking because, these dudes was 14, 15, 16 years old. So, they still going through puberty. Not that we wasn't or that you couldn't grow a little bit or whatever the case, but it was the seriousness of that because they said they made that program for them guys purely just to get older before they put them in general population with the other males.
Right. And what was Clemens like? So historically, Clemens had a reputation. One of the other guys that I know, he's over on the Walls unit right now, said that when he was there in the 90s, it was called Burning Hell, just because of how rock and roll it was, which is totally different from where you and I met each other. It was a really laid back minimum security unit, and we were all in college. So just as a teenager, what was it like for you to be in that environment and just thinking about your surroundings and all these other young people in the same situation?
All right. Well, one thing to describe it now, looking back on it, it was a red brick prison, which means it's an older unit. It's a lot more going on older units because they don't have the same structure as them small little 10 units with cameras everywhere. It had the double fence, so it could technically be medium custody, if not closed custody. I think they had the BOQs where the officers used to stay. The new units don't got that. But the biggest thing, and it actually made me feel okay, because like anybody going into prison, you always got these ideas of what you see on TV and people being shanked and killed and raped. In prison today don't really exist in that manner. Overall, I ain't gonna speak about every state or every prison, not that those things don't happen. But the reason I say I found some comfort there is because the majority of stuff that was going on was regular fighting. Now, it was a lot of fighting, but it was regular fighting. It wasn't no, people being stabbed to death, beaten to death, or anything like that. So, I didn't know all that coming in at the time. And it was a wake-up call. We sat there in the committee. It's about 11 of us, and they sending guides in. I didn't realize what was going on. But, if you was black, they would send somebody black. If you was white or Mexican, they would send somebody from your race. Wherever you was from, they would send somebody back in from there. If you was affiliated with a gang, they would send somebody in. And you thinking that these people is cool or people that was from your neighborhood that you may knew, but what they was doing, they was getting ready to check you. Once you got your items and all that other stuff, you got to the wing, they'd be like, hey, let's fall to the back or let's go in the cell. And you got to fight. You don't end up fighting, you end up in a lot of other trouble that you don't want to be in. Getting past that, learning the rules, even though I had been in a transit facility, being what's an ID unit, it's an extra layer of consequences and rules. So having to learn that, the big old showers, kind of like how you see in prisons, everybody in there, that was like that compared to the places on the transit facilities where you got the individual things or whatnot. So I was having to relearn, stuff again.
Yeah, that was one of the differences. So back in the 90s on places like Beto, Cofield, Ferguson, and Clemens, everybody was getting checked in like that. When I ended up on Hightower, that was not going on. Right. And I went through it anyway. Not because I had to, but because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. So I just chose to fight somebody that was somewhat affiliated with people from the city I was from.
Right.
So ultimately, how long did you do in prison?
I did 9 years, 4 days on a 10-year sentence.
And so you're in this environment, and you and I met each other in the context of college. Right. What was the thought process behind that? What encouraged you, or what was the thinking that led to you being involved in education while you were incarcerated?
Well, during those first couple of years in that transit facility, you don't really have anybody in the transit facility that's going to be locked up for an exceptionally long amount of time. So, I'm meeting older guys who've been through the system before. I'm meeting younger guys who got their heads screwed on, of course, writing letters to the house, people telling you to better yourself. And, one of the major ways in prison to do that is through school and programs. So, I done always been pretty smart when it comes to books. So I went ahead and got my GED, once I got to an ID unit, I started applying for trades in schooling. The youth offender grant came in very, very handy because I was able to do it for free. So I was taking as much as I could. Not that I wanted to do that much time, but even if I did, I wanted to take as much as I could while the college classes was free. And I wanted to focus my trades, around cars and other things that I wanted to do when I got out. But talking to older cats, older guys that I saw kind of had it together or was moving the right direction, I leaned on them both for business knowledge and for knowledge in general. One example I like to use was, about kids, learning what a man is and what a man ain't, even though that they are criminals. I know we don't commonly think of it like that, but these people are still fathers, brothers, sons, and everything else that we have in society. I remember what I considered a gangster guy talking about doing his little girl's hair. And I just thought that was so cool. He was like, what are you going to do when the mom not around? You got to learn these things. And before he said that, had I been in the world young like that, I'd have been like, oh man, that's feminine. Don't do that. Or I would have had this block that's not there, but that I'm creating, or me and my friends talking about, which when you become a father, when you get a job, when you try to move throughout the community to help not only yourself and others, it comes with, responsibilities. And I think I was learning responsibility through them guys because I was searching, what is really a man? What is a man's job? What is a man's responsibility? Because obviously I wasn't getting it right, listening to the songs and the movies and the other things I was chasing, in the streets.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. I remember when I went to juvenile for a little while, there was a kid in there who was like 12. I think I was 16. He was 12 or 13. He was from Houston. And there was another guy in there who was 17 or 18. And he was, a big guy, like 6 foot, big, hefty guy. But then Luis was his name, was this little short, he was small for his age. So there was like this huge difference between Luis and I can't remember what the other guy's name was. But Luis started to have, some facial hair. During the time we were locked up, he started to get the facial hair. And he had never shaved before. And he never had anybody teach him. So Sebastian, that was it. Yeah, so Sebastian comes in the room and shows him how to shave. And I remember watching this, I'm 16 years old and I was just thinking like you were about the irony or the tragedy, just depending on how you interpret that situation, that this is a guy teaching a younger guy, something that's just basic to manhood, but he's having to learn it. And we're already all incarcerated together. So that was there wasn't a turning point for me because I still got in a lot of trouble afterwards, but it was very, I guess, a meaningful moment to me when I realized the situation all of us were in. In addition, what you said was also something I think is important for people to know is that the older people in the prison or the people who have been there for a long time did stand out to us as like mentors or have those sort of father figure roles where they teach us and help us understand either mistakes that they made, the path, not to go down. They did serve in those capacities in prison. And so there are a lot of people in prison who have life sentences, who are never going to go home, who have changed their ways. And now that is a role that they play in the prison. And the reason I think that's important is with regard to education. Because a lot of times the educational programming that's available to people is only available to those who are short timers, those who are getting ready to go home within a few years of release. And so people who have a life sentence, or especially back in the 90s when you had all those kids getting 50 years and 60 years, and they had no educational opportunities, these are young kids who are just supposed to spend decades in prison with no access to any sort of formal educational process. But for those people who have to serve a long time, if they have access to quality education, they're the ones who create and maintain that prison culture. And if they're educated and they've changed their ways, then it's going to trickle down to some of the others, the short timers, the new guys, the young guys. And so I have always tried to include or incorporate or put a plug in there for people who are listening that it's one thing to have access to education in there, but for short timers, to give them trades, like to work on cars and to do welding and things like that. But education is also needed for those who have long sentences, who are going to be there for quite some time, because once they change and begin to see the world differently, then that affects others who are there with them.
Right. To add to that, me personally, right, this is my perspective. I think prison reform should be at the top, in the top tier of ways of changing our country. The reason I say that is gangbanging. And the way it really, really got spread, the way it really took root was in prison, because guys would go to Texas, they would go to New York, they would go to Florida, and they got these long sentences. And, if you can hold your own weight, guys look at that. They see it as light. They want to be around it. And when they come around, what they're going to ask is like, how did you get that? I want that. I want to be like that. Well, man, you got to be down with Grape Street. You got people claiming Grape Street, and that's somewhere in California. They don't even know, where it comes from, what it means. So if prison can have that type of impact, and now, gangs is everywhere. So just specifically talking about the Bloods and Crips, they're everywhere. So if you just have a mentality of just, hey, lock people up, throw away the key, it's gonna be people going to prison and jail who are only gonna be there for a while, and they're gonna have this anger, this frustration. And when they come down here with the person that has the highest frustration, anger, misguidance, they're gonna pick up them ways, they're gonna tell them a smarter way of doing wrong, and those people, that hatred is gonna come back into society. Instead of, I don't necessarily want to use the word healing, but dealing with it, getting past it. If we flip that switch, we can bring better things into society through education, character change, and the mentalities of saying, not just contributing to society, but contributing to the world. We all need the world to survive, and we only got one of them. We got to take care of it. So, I think it's very important about prison reform and the mentalities between officers, administration, and inmates to make things better in the world.
Yeah, so education has that kind of transformative effect on individuals, and then that spills out into the people that we encounter, in the prison. And then it also affects, for example, the officer culture. Prisons where there's educational programs are safer. People are invested in what they're doing with educationally. Typically, what you think of is that when you go to prison, if you're not involved in something like education or religious services, then you're just learning better strategies and how to be a better criminal. That's what my juvenile experience was like. That's what my state jail experience was like. I just went in there and people are just plotting and scheming and coming up with more ways to game the system and make money and commit crimes. These are intellectual people. They're smart people. It's just that their motives, their goals, their aspirations are all driven in this, destructive direction. But in addition to merely education that affects the mind, there's also what you said, you called it character training, or some sort of character development, in addition to just being smart, because you can be a really smart criminal, a smart, immoral person, but also something about character, learning things like, perseverance or courage or open-mindedness and things like that. I think that education, well, we do know empirically that it is one of the number one factors in reducing recidivism, but just as a humane response to crime and poverty and all the other things that play into the kind of bad choices we make, I think education is valuable. There was a separate question about sort of turning points in your prison experience. You did mention some of that. You mentioned just talking to some of the older guys and then writing home to family and people encouraging you to do well. Are there other things that you, and right now you just explained a lot about things that you think would help in terms of prison reform and how it would affect the country? Are there other talking points that you want people to know and understand about the system or just incarceration generally, prison reform?
I would have to say I didn't have one little incident or one time where there was a turning point where I said, hey, man, I'm going to go down the right path. I think it was a process. I think most people, human nature, most things come slow to us. But even when I was in the transit facility and I kind of got, grabbed a hold of myself, if I could compare it to anything, like grabbing the reins on a horse instead of my life just going wherever the horse wanted to go or who was guiding the horse, I was like, this street stuff is not gonna do me, any good. The stuff I've been hearing in these songs and these movies and this other stuff is not gonna do me well in my life and in my future. Look at where I am now. And I think back to something my dad told me dozens and dozens of times. He told me a man is mental, physical, and spiritual, and he should work on those things every day. And somewhere around that 18-month, two-year mark, I took that and I ran with it. I didn't have anything specifically, but every day I tried to better myself along those lines. And I think about halfway through me serving time is when I turned toward bettering my character. I think I could have got by, and I think that's what a lot of people do. Hey, my good things is my good things and my bad things are my bad. But about halfway through that, I started thinking about, my life after I passed, and I started trying to take God's path, I'm gonna call it, more seriously in my life and devoting, learning and building toward that to be the best man I can be until my days come to an end. And it was just an ongoing process. Like I say, from trades, anybody I knew that said anything about business, whether they knew me, looked like me, it really didn't matter. If they had a little bit they can give, if they had a lot, I was trying to learn. And it's more than just books and science, because learning how to speak, how to be open, and some of the other things that you mentioned as well. I never forget having a conversation with a guy, and he made a comment like, I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he said going to prison is a young man's game. And not that I was offended, but like I didn't understand. I was like, well, what you mean by that? Anybody can come to prison. And he said, well, what I meant by that was when you're young, it's easier for you to rebound. He said, man, I'm older. I got a mortgage. He said, I got grandkids now. I had this here going on. I had that. And not that a young person can't have that, but when you come out and you 25 versus when you 45, the 25-year-old will tend to get more help. He'll tend to get more support. So as the other people, when you grown, hey, you made that mistake, and not that don't apply for the other. And I never thought about it like that. But the reason I brought that up is because when we got up and we left from that conversation, that guy was the same age as my father. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why can't I talk to my dad like that? I got uncles, and I developed talking with them in a way that I couldn't talk to my father. But I saw that whether you're 25, 45, or 65, it's still a person. Y'all have things in common. You have things that are not common, and it's stuff that you can talk about. It's stuff that you can relate to. Y'all can have similar goals or be in a similar place, like having the same job together, trying to qualify for the same thing. Your kids or something might be participating in the same sport, event, or activity. And it just started broadening my mind because, as you said, we were so young when we went in. It's a lot that happens between your late teens to your mid-20s that dictate a lot in your life. And it's a lot of life lessons that you have to learn. It's just that we learned them in prison. And it's so many things that can help you. Of course, it's not all good, but the ability to adapt, the ability to speak up when it's a time to, when it's not, how to do it, filing grievances, learning informal resolution. These are all things that can also help you a lot in free society. And like I said, I think I really took them things and ran with it. And like I say, it's really more than just being smart, because anybody can be smart, but wisdom and trying to be wise and have understanding that accounts for a lot. And I think even though I didn't understand it at the time, that's what I was seeking and trying to apply in my life to be a better man.
Yeah, I think a lot of those things are learned through role modeling and examples, wisdom in particular. We can read textbooks about various information content, but wisdom is one of those things that should mostly be learned through the examples that we see, the experiences that we have, and it is a manifestation of character traits like self-control, openness and perseverance. So I was 24 when I got out. How old were you, and what was that like first getting out after serving all that time in prison through some formative young adult years, like you said?
Right. I almost missed my whole 20s. I got out when I was 27, and I was happy. I thought I was going to have to do my whole 10, being in there for so long, and I'm so grateful for that year that I had being free on parole. I still give so much thanks for that. But getting out, my family was very open, very loving, very supportive, but it's not coming from a place with a lot of money, but I had somewhere to go to. That was an old car on the side of the house. I used to have, that my dad had, that he was trying to give me as a graduation present before I went to prison. It was still sitting on the side of the house. And I was like, man, I can't believe you still got that old thing. He said, man, old thing, that car run. I'm like, what? I said, yeah, you put a battery on that thing, say some black smoke gonna come out the tailpipe, but it's gonna run. So that was real fortunate. I was able to get it tagged, and it ran rough, but it ran. I went to Houston, Austin. I was visiting everybody, and I could go to interviews and other little things after a while, because I had to reapply to get my license and all that. But every little thing counts, and like I say, my family was very supportive with the room. I didn't have to worry about nothing with some bills. Bryan College Station is a larger town, not a major city, but it was several, I don't know what you call them, but places that help you find temporary work, temporary services.
Yeah, temp agencies, staffing.
Yeah, temp agencies. So I was able to get to work because they already know a lot of the places that'll take felons to get you moving. So I was able to do that until I started working with my cousin who had a HVAC installation company. I mean, he also did servicing too, but I had taken that trade. So here it is, I'm being able to use my trade, make me some money and grow, while I'm moving. It was a process. I'm back at home, around my cousins, my uncles and aunties, my mom, my dad, a lot of, positive encouragement, a lot of understanding and patience, reconnecting with my friends. This is really before social media. So, we doing it the old way through phone calls, or hey, they used to live here, and they get there and they ain't there, and they give you a number. It took some time to level off, because at first, getting me a better car, took some time. Trying to save money. I had never really did that before. Getting locked up when I was a teenager, and then finally getting to the point where I want to go get, a place of my own. So, I can have my own control. And those things just take time. I don't think anything with my process was out of the norm, because my mentality was, when I would go out with physical applications, I was starting what they used to call mini malls or whatever. And I just would start at each store, and I just would not stop, and I would go around and around and then drive to the next one. I would look in the paper, and whatever was looking to hire that didn't need certain qualifications, I was filling it out to make it happen. But I also had an entrepreneurial spirit in me, which led me to go to throwing newspapers. I really went to do that on the side of having my full-time job, so I could have what I call play money to, mess with my cars, buy some extra clothes, some nice stuff, or to possibly make some investments.
And so through all of that, how did you get to the point you're at now? Because you're out there doing work out in West Texas, and now you're running your own company. And so what was the process like getting involved in that?
I think the newspaper was very helpful in that this is right before the big recession of like 2008, 2009.
Right.
And I had totally applied myself to that because I lost my full-time job with something outside of my control. So I say, man, let me really try to do something with this newspaper thing. And then just having things that you don't realize is skills or traits, treating people kindly. I ended up being real cool with a lot of the people at the newspaper, from distribution, people who worked in the cubicles. And when I found out it was people making real good money doing half of the work that I was doing, because the route was more rural, it was more houses compared to apartments, higher incomes. It took about a year, but having done time before, that allowed me to have patience to whereas, I think if I had been younger and hadn't been through them things, I'd be like, hey man, I want it right now. So you hoping that in 2-3 weeks that it's going to happen. And it took a little bit less than a year, but it still took about 10 months before I was able to, really turn it into what I would say like a $4 or $5 grand a month, business, with me working about 5 hours a day, maybe 7 or 8 hours with the big Sunday paper. And that just exposed me to a lot. I started working with through my uncles who were fixing salvage title cars. So I think the inspiration of seeing them, my father used to have a janitorial business on the side in the 80s, a little bit into the 90s. And then seeing a particular guy that ran a used car lot and seeing how much money he was having, and let alone it was cars, something I love doing. I said, man, I want to do that one day. So I started dabbling with it, and having money past what I needed, allowed me to start dabbling with things. And the fact that I loved it so much, they say that now it's not really work if it's something that you love doing. And that just spurred things. It put me in other circles where other people were talking about bigger things, just like with the oil field. I always knew as a plan B, I wanted to get my CDL. I remember one time I had an old convertible car, and a guy was like, hey man, I give you my dump truck for that car. And I was like, man, I wouldn't mind having a dump truck, but it's just gonna sit in the yard because I don't know what to do with it. I look back on that. I wish I had took that deal then. But going through some hard times, having to reevaluate, go back to my people's house again, sleep on that couch. It's not gonna always be hunky dory. You're gonna have some times where you fall, and that fall might be a little rough. I think the good thing about me and my heart and my mind, I never knew I wanted to go down that road to end up doing, 5 years, 11 years in prison again over something dealing, with money. But I think that takes a degree of responsibility. You might be at a job that you don't like, or the pay isn't what you like, and you're going to have to work through that. You're going to have to figure things out to take care of yourself and take care of your family. And sometimes, society, even family, loved ones, they're not going to like what you're doing, or they're not going to like your progression. But as long as you're taking care of you and you aren't harming people, harming society, I think you can continually, slowly move forward to get yourself back where you wanted to be. And like I say, I had some friends and colleagues that led me on about the CDL. I ended up going to a over-the-road school. They take people all day long. If you got your license, you got an address, you can get in and you can drive over the road. And I got a little bit of experience. And if you got your CDL, if they're hiring, if they're really, really hiring, that's an automatic hire. And like I say, when I found out from a friend how much money he was making, like I say, I'll never forget, he told me he made $9,500 gross in 1 month. And I'm like, man, I'm out here driving, gone a whole month, only home for 3-4 days, trying to make $3,000. Yeah. I can go home and it's still a sacrifice about being gone. But I mean, in a matter of short time, I can come up with some money to start my own business and work for myself and be home. I think those are the two biggest benefits about working for yourself. It's not just the money, but it's the control of your time.
Yeah, I remember when you started making money like that, or at least the first time you publicized it, you were posting stuff on Facebook about your checks. And that's when I asked you, hey, can I show this to the guys in prison? And they loved that because it was just real for them. They could see it. They
Right.
could hear you narrating how
Right.
things went down, and that's how you meant it to be
Right.
seen. And for people out here, but I brought it in there to them, and they loved seeing that. So some of the other professors have little clips of that they're able to show the students as well. So it
Right.
sounds
Right.
like your whole family was full of entrepreneurs and people involved in starting their own businesses for quite some time.
Right.
And the story you tell about, with the newspapers and then learning about how other people were doing it and different ways they were going about it. And then you decided to learn about that and move forward with that. And then taking or learning other things like the CDL and then messing with the cars and all of these different things. You didn't focus on one area. You didn't
Right.
focus on one job or one skill, one trade. You had your hands in everything. And so I was talking to somebody this morning who's been out. He did about 18 years. He's been out almost 2 years, and he says a lot of the same things that you did. He started off with 2 jobs, one for $8 an hour, one at $11 an hour. He was working both of them at the same time, but then he learned from them, what the supervisor's position was like, and then moved up to supervisor. And so he just had that spirit of learning and entrepreneurial drive that led him up to $23, $25 an hour. And now he started his own company back in August, I want to say. So these are all some very similar things that those of us who have been successful are not just focusing on one area, whatever their dream or passion may be, but they've got their hands in a lot of different things because it gives them a broader base to move forward.
Right. 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 I know business ain't for everybody, but I love things that you can do on side of having your full-time gig, because a lot of people do want to dabble, they do want to try it, but they don't want to leave the safety of, I know if I clock in, I get that paycheck that pays the bills, that take care of, my family.
Risk. It takes
Right,
risk to
right.
be that.
But it's so many things you can do on side of that, from Uber and Lyft, landscaping, pressure washing, cutting hair, cosmetology, retail. It's you can sell clothes, you can sell bags out of your car, from your house, or online. There's so many different things you can do if you want to increase your revenue, or that's your passion, or that's your desire. It's an open world for that, type of thing. And you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to come up, with the new computer or something. You can keep selling hamburgers. You can keep selling T-shirts with the smiley face on it. It doesn't have to be innovative in order for you to produce, revenue. And everything don't have to be $1 million idea. The way I used to see it with the cars, right? Of course, everybody likes to double their money. They would love to triple their money. But my mentality was, dealing with my uncles, well, I would buy the car from the guy that they was dealing with from the lot, right? So he's not gonna sell me the car at the same price that he bought it out the auction. So I got to give him some money on top of it. And this leads to what I was saying about having my dealer's license one day. So I'm having to pay that extra. Not that I mind. When it comes to my uncles, I told them to charge me the exact same thing that the other guys was charging, because I didn't want a discount, right? So when everything's said and done, the car is complete, I would sell my car a little bit cheaper than the same car that they were selling on the lot. So people would come buy the car from me. So my investment is higher. I'm selling it for lower. But my mentality was, if I could have $2,500 in a car and sell it for $4,000, I just made $1,500 and I did not lift one finger. I am content with that. I would like for it to be more down the line, but if that's the start, I can deal with that, because you can go work in a factory somewhere and make $400 a week brain home. That's $1,600. I just made $1,500. I brought more work to my uncles and them making money. The other guy made some money on top of selling the car. And eventually I'll be able to lower those expenses. I get my dealer's license. I find the places to get the parts myself. So plus that, also having that extra vehicle helped me with my paper route. People on my paper route needed I would get 4-cylinder cars to save money. So they started buying cars from me. When I went to the oil field, they started buying stuff from me. I had a friend that was getting, laptops and shirts. I'm selling that to them. Hey man, if you can make $20 in a day on top of your job, that just took care of your gas money or the little vices or your little Netflix payment. It contributes to making, your life easier. And that's the way that I see it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have unreasonable expectations in the sense that the $20 they don't see as a big deal, or
Right.
they're not willing to put in the work to do all the extra side jobs to make that extra money, which at some point will grow exponentially, or something is
Right.
at some point. But they don't want to put in the hard work and the effort.
Right.
So, the last thing, I guess, is just where do you see yourself moving forward? What do you want to do moving into the future?
Well, in the immediate future, I went back to the oil field because it would be easier for me to get the money for my own big rig. I say big rig instead of big truck because it just seems so confusing with some of my friends. They got their own trucks. So I can have the money for my big rig because I want to have more than one stream of income. And between the big rig and the pressure washing, that'll very, very well, take care of me and my family, let alone hustling the cars on the side. But any other thing that I want to get into, the revenue from that big rig will provide it. And with oil field money, to be honest, it only take, maybe 5 months to have the money to buy one cash and a little capital to get it started. Plus, I'm gonna do a little work on my pressure washing trailer, add me some signs. I think I'm gonna upgrade and get me a dually. Not that I need a dually to pull that pressure washer or to pull the single cars, but also if needed, whether me, myself, or I have a friend that wants to get back into driving, let him take the dually, let him hot shot with it. Once again, I don't have to make a lot of money with that, pay him well, take care of my equipment, and then I can get anything to pull my pressure washer. I also try to keep it simple when it comes to financing. I think that's what kills a lot of business. They say lack of capital kills a lot of businesses, but most businesses will produce money. But if you need $2,200, $2,500 for your mortgage, if you got, 3-4 kids yourself, your lady got 2-3 kids herself, you adding in this Netflix, you like nice shoes, you want to get a 4-wheeler, you want to buy this other stuff. I see this stuff in the oil field, like expenses and bills, they never stop. And just like with the oil field naturally goes up and down, up and down. It's a natural flow. They're going to be hiring a lot. You're going to have a couple years. They do well. They're going to have some slight slowdowns. They might lay a few people off. It might hit rock bottom. They lay a lot of people off. And yeah, you made $100,000 a year, but now you got to go back and be home for a year and a half with a regular job, making $400, $500, $600 a week. And you can't afford that $1,200 hiked up truck with the mud grip tires on it and that Harley and them ATVs and all that other stuff. And you lose all that you invested in. So I tell people to keep it simple, start small. I have a friend that just bought him a new trailer. I'm buying his old mobile home. I'm gonna stick it on my family land. I'm gonna get everything taken care of while I'm out here in the oil field, from getting a pad, getting the back of my family's property knocked down, getting my pad made, getting my own light pole, getting the water ran so my bills will be mine and the family's house will be theirs. As I told them, I always take care of the taxes. That'll be my way of helping the family. Eventually, I hope to find my own little piece of land, build me a house, renovate me a house. But that's the money side of things. But another big thing about that with the multiple streams of income, whether big or small, is to be able to control my time, because I want to do certain things in the community that I live in with the social issues that's going on, and both with prison, working, with my brother Jabril, Brandon Whiting, giving back to the brothers in whatever way, that we can. Like he has the book thing going. I got a friend want to start a barbershop. If I have some revenue, if I have some capital, if I have some assets, I can see what I can do with the people around me for building, bigger and better. The long-term goal is to be what I call a God-conscious businessman. The word I use is taqwa-preneur. The word taqwa, Arabic for God conscious, preneur from the word entrepreneur, because I think the world needs more of that. Sometimes just because it makes money, we shouldn't do it because it's harmful to other people, harmful to the environment, or harmful to the earth. I want to be willing to succeed for the right reasons and to not make it or not make money for the right reasons.
Yeah, that's something that's been consistent with you since for the last 20 or something years, when we used to argue back and forth in the day room about all sorts of ideas and whatever we were learning in the classroom at the time. Those were good times, yelling at each other and slamming the doors. It's been good. So it's been exciting for me to see you continue to be out here, maintain and grow, as well as some others that we all know, like Elliot or White Chocolate, and then quite a few others. Well, thanks for taking the time out to speak with me today, telling me a little bit more about, your background, your life, what you've been up to, and where you plan to go with it. I think it's really important that people see long-term stories and histories of people who have been incarcerated. One reason for which is to humanize us, those of us who have been incarcerated, in contrast to like the stereotypes and the things that we see in the news and in the paper. And also to give people an awareness of what happens once we're released. Because 95% of the people who are currently incarcerated will be released one day. And you and I are examples of people who've been released. We've been out for over a decade and done rather well for ourselves. But it wasn't easy. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I wanted to add.
Go ahead.
I said I wanted to add that in to exactly what you said. I would definitely want, people to know it's not going to always be easy. I think an important thing is to not trip yourself up. There's going to be enough struggles in life, in society, that you got to deal with. And every decision you make, not that it kills your life or kills your progress, they are important. We come out, we don't realize it. We have a lot of good habits. You've been away from a lot of distractions for a long time. So it's good to invest in those good habits, build those good habits, treat people right, do right by people, do right by yourself, and hope that some of those blessings, some of those good earnings, come back around again, because you will get knocked down. That's part of life. And whether you've been to prison or ain't been to prison, that is gonna happen. But when you sow good seeds, let's say it like that, when you sow good seeds, eventually they will come to harvest, and you'll get through it. You'll get through it.
Well, I can't end on a better note than that, so we'll let that stand as it is. That was great. Thanks so much.